There's a lot of people who think there's only two approaches to anger. One is you can just ventilate it, and the other is you can control it like a civilized person. Some people say you can ventilate it, but Christians control their anger, and that's, they say, the only two things you do with anger. You can either give into it or you can control it. And that's not at all what the Bible says. The Bible is nowhere near as simplistic as that. And the Bible says if that is your understanding of anger, you're in for a lot of trouble. It says in the book of Hebrews, "Beware lest a root of bitterness remain, and springing up defile many." What that means is that you're not supposed to deny your anger. If you have that view that says Christians don't get angry, you're very likely to deny it when it's there. The book of Hebrews says you should always be extremely aware of whether and how much anger you've got. Because if it's hidden, if it remains and it's hidden and you're not aware of it, you're not being aware of it. Beware means to be wary or aware of something. If you're not aware of how much anger and whether it's there, you're going to be in trouble. It will defile you. And so obviously suppression of anger is the wrong thing. A lot of Christians, because they're taught that they can't be angry, Christians don't get angry, you will call your anger anything else but anger. You'll say, "I'm depressed," because Christians can get depressed. That's not so bad. You'll say, "I'm upset." Christians get upset. You can say, "I'm worried." Of course, Christians get worried. But you don't say, "I'm angry," when actually you are. Secondly, the word "be angry" must also mean that not only is anger something not to be suppressed, but secondly, that anger is sometimes required. This is a command. Paul actually says, "Be angry." He doesn't say, "Now, Christians don't get angry," and he doesn't even say, "Now, Christians, if you do get angry, I guess that's inevitable, but, it's really a bad thing." He says, "Be angry." And that means that anger sometimes is required. Go further than that, or put another way, it means that sometimes if you're not angry, you are wrong. See, anger is something that God is doing constantly, something that is true of God, and therefore it can't be a sin. In fact, you can go this far. This is a bit of a tangent. I'm not sure there's any emotion that we know of that's a sin in itself. No emotion is intrinsically wrong or intrinsically bad. They're all created by God. They go bad because they're tainted with sin. They're like fruit that get rancid. They're like food that goes bad. But in themselves, they're fine. I'm not sure there's any emotion that's wrong. Well, you say, what about hate? That hates anger. And besides that, God hates evil. He says so. In fact, when David is at his best, he says, "I hate your enemies with a perfect hatred." Perfect hatred, you see? Hatred is something that God's capable of, so it can't be necessarily wrong. It's only wrong if it gets sinful. What about anger? We already said that. What about worry? Somebody says, worry is a bad thing. Yeah, but worry is just concern gone bad. See? Concern, a deep concern for someone's welfare or the health of something, concern. Worry is just concern gone bad. Well, somebody says, well, what about, you see, when you start to think about it, you begin to realize that there really aren't any bad emotions. They're just emotions gone bad. Now, what about anger? We have to keep this in mind about anger. Last week we defined it. This week we said, let's take a look at Jesus getting angry and God getting angry, because those are great examples. Last week I gave you an example I won't go into now. And that's the example in 2 Corinthians 7 where Paul talks about anger being indignation and a zeal to see justice done. In Mark 5 we see Jesus getting angry. When Jesus is about to heal a man who has a shriveled hand, the people around him, the Pharisees, start to watch, because they can't wait to find him, see if he violates any of their Sabbath rules, because it's the Sabbath day. And if he violates the Sabbath, then they got him. And Jesus gets angry, very angry. Why? That's the key. Anger is energy aroused in defense of something good and released against something evil. That's the reason why it would be wrong in many situations not to be angry. Anger is energy aroused in defense of something. You want to defend something. If you see something that's threatened, that's wonderful and good, and you don't get angry, you are not a good person. If you see somebody being oppressed, if you see somebody being used, if you see justice being trampled on and you don't get angry, you are not like God. God has to get angry because He's good. In fact, the more good you are, the more righteous, the more holy, the more pure, the more loving you are, the more angry you're going to get when you see certain things that need to be defended. Anger is energy aroused, and therefore it's released against something that's evil.